He was known for his boldness, for his unfiltered speech, and for his sharp tongue. In online forums, live events, and even casual conversations, he mocked Islam with confidence. He would roll his eyes at the mention of religion, raise his voice during debates, and use sarcasm to ridicule Muslim beliefs. To him, Islam was just another outdated system of thought, and Muslims were blind followers of an old book. He believed he was enlightened, that logic and reason were on his side, and that anyone holding on to faith, especially Islam, was simply misled. His words were harsh, sometimes cruel, but they were always loud. He wasn't afraid to offend because he thought truth needed to be loud. And anything that could not argue back didn't deserve to be respected. Then came a moment that would change everything. Not through a fiery debate, not through facts or intellectual counter-arguments, but through silence. One day, while speaking at a public event, he launched into yet another rant about Islam. The crowd was mixed. Some laughed, some stayed silent. Others shifted uncomfortably. Among the audience was an elderly Muslim man, quiet, composed, and calm. When the speaker's eyes met his, he expected resistance or anger, perhaps a loud defense. Instead, the old man simply looked at him with kindness. No words, no debate, just silence and a soft smile that seemed to carry centuries of wisdom. The speaker was caught off guard. It was the first time he didn't get a reaction, no counterattack, no emotional outburst. Just silence, a silence so calm it unsettled him. He continued speaking, louder now, trying to provoke a reaction, but the old man just listened with the same gentle expression. That silence echoed. It followed him home. It replayed in his mind over and over again. Why didn't he respond? Was he afraid? Or was there something more powerful in that calm? In the days that followed, he couldn't shake that moment. The old man's silence had said more than 1,000 arguments ever could. It made him think. He started reading, not to mock this time, but to understand. He picked up a copy of the Qur'an, not to criticize, but out of curiosity. And for the first time, he read with an open heart. He expected to find contradictions and confusion, but instead, he found clarity, depth, and beauty. The words were different now, speaking to a part of him he didn't know existed. That moment of silence had planted a seed of humility, a crack in the wall of arrogance he had built over the years. He began to realize that the very people he mocked had something he was missing: peace, patience, purpose. That old man's calm wasn't weakness, it was strength. A strength that came from certainty, from faith, from knowing the truth so deeply that it didn't need to be shouted. It just needed to be lived. This wasn't the story of a man who lost a debate. It was the story of a man who found something far greater than he was ever looking for. Not through argument, but through character. Not through noise, but through stillness. He had mocked Islam publicly, but a Muslim's silence, grounded in truth and humility, left him speechless. And in that silence, he began a journey that would change his life forever. He stood at the front of a crowded room, microphone in hand, confident as ever. The event was supposed to be a debate, but to him, it was just another opportunity to prove how wrong religion was, especially Islam. He had done it many times before, mocking prayer, ridiculing the Qur'an, portraying Muslims as stuck in the past. He cracked jokes to the crowd, drawing laughter from those who already agreed with him. To him, it was all performance, another crowd, another chance to make faith look foolish. In the middle of his talk, he noticed a man sitting quietly in the front row. Elderly, with a white beard and a traditional outfit, the man's presence seemed to represent everything he was speaking against. The speaker saw him as the perfect symbol he could mock him, maybe even draw him into an argument. So he pointed at him using him as an example in his speech, half laughing as he made sarcastic remarks about Muslims and their beliefs. Everyone looked at the old man, expecting him to defend himself, to rise and argue back, but he didn't. Instead, the man stayed silent. He looked at the speaker with a calm, almost peaceful gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, no attempt to interrupt, just quiet dignity. The speaker paused for a moment, thrown off. He waited for a reaction, any reaction, but nothing came. The old man didn't even flinch. He just kept sitting there with the same serene expression. For the first time, the speaker felt something unusual: discomfort. He was used to arguments. He was prepared for debates, but he wasn't prepared for silence. That silence, in that one moment, spoke louder than any protest or retort ever could. It unsettled him, made him feel exposed. He finished his talk but couldn't shake the image of that man's face, so calm in the storm of his mockery. That night, something lingered in his heart. Not guilt exactly, but a strange sense of being seen. Not by the audience, not by the man, but by something deeper. The silence had left an impression, and he didn't know why. But he would soon discover that this quiet moment was the beginning of a transformation he never expected. He couldn't sleep that night. The silence of the old man wasn't just a moment he could forget. It became a weight on his chest, echoing louder than the laughter of the crowd. He had faced many debaters before, shut down arguments with clever comebacks, and dismissed faith with confidence. But this time was different. No one had argued back, yet he didn't feel victorious. That old man's calm eyes stayed with him, and the memory played over and over, like a loop he couldn't escape. Over the next few days, he began to reflect in ways he hadn't before. He started wondering why the man hadn't responded. Was it fear? Weakness? Or something else entirely? Something he didn't understand yet? That question turned into curiosity, and for the first time he searched online for stories about Islam, not to criticize, but to learn. What he found surprised him. Stories of peace, kindness, resilience, converts from all walks of life, sharing how Islam changed their hearts, how it brought them meaning and clarity. One night, without telling anyone, he downloaded a free copy of the Qur'an. He expected to find contradictions or outdated concepts, but instead, he found verses that spoke with a calm power, a quiet depth, much like the man who had said nothing at all. Words like, "Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest." Surah Ar-Ra'd 13:28 hit something inside him that he never knew was missing. He realized that while he had always demanded answers from the outside world, he had never truly looked inward. The silence that day hadn't been weakness, it was strength. A strength rooted in certainty, in inner peace, in something unshakable. The old man hadn't needed to defend Islam because Islam didn't need defending through noise. Its truth was strong enough to speak through calmness. That realization broke down the pride that had shielded him for years. For the first time, he felt humble. For the first time, he felt open. He hadn't spoken to the old man after that event, but in many ways he had become his first teacher. Not through words, but through example. And what began as mockery was quietly turning into admiration, then reflection, and eventually the beginning of something new. He began reading more about Islam, not from critics or biased sources, but directly from Muslims themselves. He watched interviews of converts, listened to lectures, and read blog posts by people who had embraced the faith after long searches for meaning. What struck him most was not just the intellectual strength of the arguments, but the emotional peace that radiated from those who spoke about Islam. They weren't trying to win debates. They were simply sharing a truth that had transformed them from the inside out. That kind of peace was something he had never experienced, not even in his moments of public success or personal achievement. One evening, he watched a video of a Muslim scholar explaining a verse from the Qur'an. The verse said, "And not equal are the good deed and the bad. Repel evil by that which is better, and thereupon the one whom between you and him is enmity will become as though he was a devoted friend." Surah Fussilat 41:34. It hit him like a wave. He paused the video and read the verse again and again. That was exactly what the old man had done. He had repelled his public mockery not with anger, not with pride, but with silence, patience, and dignity. And in doing so, he had flipped the power dynamic. The mocker became the listener. The attacker became the seeker. This verse wasn't just a poetic line. It was a guide to human interaction, to emotional control, to transforming hearts. He realized that Islam didn't just talk about God and worship. It taught a complete way of life. A life that centered on humility, justice, mercy, and wisdom. All the things he claimed to stand for in his secular beliefs were deeply rooted in this faith he had dismissed for so long. And unlike many philosophies that changed with time, Islam stood firm, consistent, and dignified for over 1,400 years. He thought back to his encounter again. It was no longer just a memory. It had become a turning point. That moment, where he expected a battle and received silence, had started a ripple effect in his soul. And now, with every verse he read, with every story he heard, and with every doubt replaced by awe, he felt something awakening in him. A desire for truth, for peace, and perhaps for faith. As his understanding of Islam deepened, so did his inner struggle. He found himself in a place he never expected, questioning everything he once believed with such certainty. The man who once mocked religion now spent quiet nights reading the Qur'an, listening to lectures, and reflecting on his own emptiness. He had lived so long chasing logic and reason, thinking they were enough. But the peace he saw in the lives of Muslims, especially that old man's silent strength, made him realize something profound. Intellect without humility leads to arrogance. But true understanding begins with the heart. One night he came across a verse that struck him deeply. So whoever Allah wants to guide, he expands his breast to Islam. Islam Al-An'am 6:12-5. He paused. It perfectly described what he was feeling. It wasn't a sudden moment, but a slow and steady expansion of the heart, like a door being unlocked from the inside. He began to realize that his journey wasn't about winning arguments anymore. It was about finding peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't depend on applause, followers, or achievements. The more he learned, the more he saw the consistency and balance in Islam. It didn't ask him to abandon reason, it encouraged him to use it. It didn't demand blind faith. It called him to reflect, to observe, to question, and to understand. He had always admired justice, discipline, compassion, and clarity. And now he saw all of those values shining through the teachings of Islam. It was no longer just a religion to him, it was a way of life that aligned with what he had been searching for all along. But the most humbling realization came when he thought of the man he had once mocked, that silent figure who had said nothing, but had changed everything. That moment taught him more than any loud debate or fiery argument ever could. It was living proof that actions speak louder than words, and that true faith doesn't need to scream, it just needs to be lived with grace. He wasn't ready to announce anything publicly yet, but in his heart, the transformation had begun. The pride had started to melt, and in its place, a deep respect for the very faith he once attacked. And somewhere deep inside he knew the path he once ridiculed was slowly becoming the path he would walk. As days turned into weeks, the internal shift within him became undeniable. What started as curiosity was now transforming into conviction. He no longer read the Qur'an to challenge it, he read it to understand it, to feel its message in his heart. Each verse spoke to him in a new way. There was a rhythm, a wisdom, a sense of divine order that resonated with the very questions he had struggled with for years. He remembered mocking the very words he now held in reverence, and the irony humbled him deeply. One verse in particular stayed with him. Indeed, this Qur'an guides to that which is most just and right. Surah Al-Isra 17:9. He read it again and again, realizing how Islam wasn't just a collection of rituals, but a guide for living with justice, compassion, and balance. He began noticing how Islam protected the rights of others, emphasized kindness to parents, respect for neighbors, generosity, truthfulness, and self-restraint. It was a complete framework for a life of meaning, and for the first time, he didn't feel lost. He also started remembering Muslims he had debated online, people he had dismissed as blind followers. Now, he saw them differently. He wished he could go back and listen more, not just to their arguments, but to their sincerity. He thought of the old man again. What if he had spoken back that day? What if he had lost his calm and responded in anger? Maybe none of this would have happened. That silence was the turning point. It planted a seed that words never could. Gradually, he began practicing small aspects of the faith. He tried fasting for a day in Ramadan to understand the experience. He visited a local mosque quietly, just to observe. And when he heard the adhan, the call to prayer, for the first time in person, something inside him stirred. It felt like a call to return, not just to God, but to his own soul, a place he hadn't visited in years. He hadn't yet taken his shahada, the formal declaration of faith, but in his heart he knew he was no longer the same man. The mocker had become the seeker. The challenger had become the student. And the truth he once tried to silence was now guiding him toward the peace he had been searching for all along. He stood at the doorstep of the mosque, hesitant but drawn by something he couldn't explain. For weeks he had been reading, learning and unlearning. Now he wanted to see with his own eyes what Islam looked like in practice, not from headlines, not from internet debates, but from real people in real life. When he finally stepped inside, the calmness overwhelmed him. The simple design, the soft recitation, the rows of people standing shoulder to shoulder, it all spoke of unity, humility, and peace. He sat quietly in the back, unnoticed. As the congregation prayed, no one judged him, no one stared. An older man sitting beside him offered a warm smile, the same kind of calm he remembered from that first encounter. After the prayer, a few people came and asked if he needed anything. They offered him water, invited him to sit, and simply asked, "Are you okay?" That question hit deeper than he expected, because yes, he was okay, but he was also changing. And that change, once built on doubt, was now turning into something stronger: faith. He met a young man who shared his own story of conversion. They sat for hours, talking about how faith wasn't always about having all the answers, but about being willing to ask the right questions. That conversation opened up his heart even more. He wasn't alone in this journey. Others had walked this path before. Skeptics, critics, even former atheists, who had come to find peace in the same place he was being led to now. That night, he went home with a calm heart. For years, he had fought Islam with words, sarcasm, and arguments, but none of that brought him the peace he now felt in silence. Just like the silence that had started all of this, the silence of one old Muslim man who chose not to argue, not to insult back, but to show character. That one moment had led to this transformation. A journey from mockery to meaning, from ego to humility. And then, one quiet morning, after much reflection and prayer, he whispered the words, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, alla ilaha wa anna Muhammadan Rasulallah. Tears rolled down his face. The search was over. The peace he had longed for was here. Islam hadn't silenced him. It had finally spoken to his heart. In the end, his journey was not about winning or losing an argument. It was about finding peace in the most unexpected place. The man who once mocked Islam, laughed at its teachings, and looked down upon its followers found himself broken, not by a fierce debate or a clever response, but by the silence of one Muslim man who chose patience over pride. That moment of calm, that dignified silence, became the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. As he stepped deeper into the teachings of Islam, he realized that this faith wasn't about force, it was about truth that speaks, gently but powerfully to the soul. Islam didn't argue back, it invited. It didn't shout, it offered clarity. And it didn't need to prove itself, it simply stood firm in the face of mockery with a strength built on mercy and wisdom. What struck him most wasn't just the words of the Qur'an or the logic of its message, it was the character of the people who lived by it. The patience, humility, and grace he witnessed became the loudest message of all. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful dawah doesn't come from speeches or books, but from how we respond to hatred with dignity, silence, and love. So to everyone watching this video, remember, sometimes one moment of character, one act of patience, one calm response in the face of insult can touch a heart more deeply than 1,000 words. You never know whose heart is searching beneath the surface. You never know whose journey toward truth might begin with your silence. And to our dear viewers, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this powerful story. If it touched your heart, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your one share, your one comment, or your one silent prayer could be the spark that guides another soul toward peace. May we all be inspired to live our faith with sincerity, humility, and compassion. And may we remember that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in shouting, but in silence. Jazakumullahu khairan for your time. Keep seeking truth, and may peace be with you all.